We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's May 16th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Good morning, Yeon.
Good morning. And Chiji.
Good morning, Yeon.
All right, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. Let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, living costs have been surging due to inflation, but how extreme has it gotten? Well, we're seeing even the cheapest cup of coffee, instant coffee, become more expensive. That's because we're seeing a shortage of cheap Robusta beans. Wholesale prices for these relatively easily produced beans are at their highest in nearly 12 years. Now, this has brought up instant coffee prices. For instance, Germany, where the most coffee is sold in Europe, has seen instant coffee prices jump by 20% in a single year. Next up, South Korean consumers have switched from no Japan to yes Japan. For the first time in 4 years, Japan's Asahi canned draft beer has made it to convenience stores in Korea, quickly running out of stock. Japan is now the #1 travel destination for Koreans, and this is quite different from how consumers perceived Japan back in 2019. Back then, Koreans participated in nationwide boycotts against Japanese products in retaliation for ongoing trade disputes. And last but not least, many were quite bummed out to hear that it might rain almost every day this July. A widely used weather forecast site predicted that it would rain for all but 3 days in July here in Korea, but current technology can only forecast rain up to 2 weeks in advance. Even the website that offered July's weather forecast said at the very bottom of its site that the forecast should be more accurate once one checks it up to 10 days in advance. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. Now, this weather forecast didn't come from the Korea Meteorological Administration, and I couldn't trust whether we can know the exact weather for roughly 2 months later. So what better way to find out whether this forecast is accurate than to ask a weather forecaster? Take a listen to what this analyst from the KMA had to say on the viral weather forecast for July.
This graph is simply predicting what could happen in July. It's hard to say this is an official forecast. Even here at the KMA, we only provide weather forecasts for up to the next 3 days. Same goes for most other countries. That's because the further in advance we predict, the more variables we miss out on, which then leads to more errors.
Now, the analyst added that he's not 100% sure what type of scientific tool this website used to predict the weather for July, but he said it may have been the result of simple calculations using AI. So I would like to expand our newsfeed here to the studio. Chi-hee, could you relate to many people looking into what the weather might be like even 2 months down the road?
Well, I can totally relate to people wanting to know the weather 2 months in advance, because we usually plan our holidays, our trips in advance 2-3 months before usually.
Right.
And we want our special day to have the perfect weather, right? And also organizers who have outdoor events slated for 2 or 3 months afterward, they would want to know the weather in advance as well. I mean, recently on Children's Day, we all thought we would have a bright sunny day, but it was raining the whole day.
So we'll go back to our childhood.
I know, for sure.
It was, I felt sorry for the kids, and all the outdoor activities that were planned in advance, they had to be canceled or postponed or changed to indoor activities as well. And I also heard, what were you going to say?
Oh, it didn't even rain that much.
It didn't rain that much.
But it was so gloomy.
I cancelled my plans outdoors and
Really now?
it didn't actually rain.
Well, I ended up going out anyway.
You did?
Yes, I did. And also, because of the Korean Peninsula, its special geography, the uniqueness of it, it's really difficult for KMA to accurately forecast the weather, which is why it's losing trust among the public as well.
Exactly. That's why a lot of people trusted this graph, though it wasn't from the KMA. They thought that it might be more credible. But Xiong, can you explain to us why a lot of the public thinks this way?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the graph we saw, the tables that people are making a big issue about, is actually based from, I'm not sure if I can say, Microsoft operation system. So it's their sort of, I guess, AI prediction model with all the data from the previous years and things like that. Because most of the meteorological societies, associations, agencies don't actually provide a month or 2 months ahead predictions. Well, the KMA also did not have their own weather prediction modeling software until around 2019. Before that, they relied on Japanese GSM model, and afterwards the unified model from the UK, the from the 2010s. And we did develop our own model called Kim model.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately. And it was in circulation from 2020. But as it is quite new data must be collected for it to more accurately predict the future of weather. As well as the Chalian satellite is a all sources, all users satellite that the Korean government shot up back in 2010, I think.
Oh.
And that's also been scrutinized a little bit because apparently they didn't have the according software developed to actually go through the data that's been collected from the satellite. So I think a lot of mismatching and some better efforts might be a better idea.
All right, and that was our news feed for this Tuesday. Moving on to today's discussion topic, how our generation spends our money. That's been a topic we've frequently discussed here on NewsGen. Today, we're going to go deeper and look at why sometimes we have the urge to spend astronomical amounts on luxury products, but also can't bear spending a few dollars on necessities. Take a look at the screen to find out more.
Hose. This is a Korean word that can be directly translated to bluff, showing off, or flexing when you can't afford it. And many seem to think that the new generation, specifically those in their 20s and 30s, have this sort of hose. One economist YouTuber made a hose pyramid based on what he thinks youth flex money on to show off.
This captivated the attention of many as they wanted to see how far they could make it to South Korea's flexing pyramid.
We came out to the streets of Gangnam to hear from those in their 20s and 30s themselves.
According to the Ministry of Employment and Labour, the average annual salary of Koreans aged 25 to 29 is around $30,000. It is estimated to cost at least $1,700 a month to live in Seoul, which doesn't leave an awful lot of room for luxury items. Nonetheless, showing off is becoming trendy.
I actually support this type of flex. As long as you don't harm anyone, you should be able to buy anything you want. I think our generation knows how to enjoy life better than the ones before.
I think golfing has become quite common. I have a few friends who don't show off too much, but they play golf. That's why I think high-end products could come off as the owners bluffing.
I think we should be wary about spending excessively, especially since it could affect you in the long run.
We even heard from a few millennials visiting from France to see what they had to say on the flexing pyramid.
I think that maybe it's getting reversed in France because people are more focusing on slow life, eating local, buying stuff that is sustainable, but they're willing to put the money in it, and even sustainable products are quite expensive, so it's another way to kind of flex, I guess.
After asking what young people in Korea think hose is, we found out that most thought high-end products were the epitome of showing off. In reality, South Korea is the largest luxury spenders in the world. And today, NewsGen aims to look into this consumption pattern.
Now, this is the flexing pyramid we carried out to Gangnam Station. We spent around 2 hours there and asked some 60 people to choose what they thought was the biggest show-off or so-called hose. And most chose, as you can see, luxury cars and high-end products. And Xiong, you actually went out to the streets with me, as you can see through our video.
Didn't I?
So why don't you tell us a bit more about this pyramid and what people had to say about it?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of effort went into making this pyramid.
For sure.
Thank you, everyone. And the show-off pyramid, I'd like to call it better than 허세피라미드, was actually originally created by a Korean YouTuber who focuses on real estate and wealth management. The pyramid itself and order of items are entirely subjective, as mentioned by the original author, but has caught quite the attention of Korean media outlets, as it has displayed the most common consumption patterns of the Korea's public. So whilst I reiterate that the pyramid does not represent factual data, it was interesting to see what South Koreans regard as showing off.
Right.
So let's have a look at the so-called flexing pyramid.
All right.
At the top of the table, we have the expensive furniture, followed by interior design and real estate. Now, as the author mentioned, the top three items go hand in hand. If you don't have real estate already, it is more likely to stick to affordable furniture and interior designs, especially if you're renting. Next items in descending order are luxury cars, watches, golfing, luxury goods, fine dining, And lastly, body profile shoot.
And Xiao, as you mentioned, this isn't based on any factual data. That's why we went out to the streets to see like whether people could relate.
Choose, yeah.
Exactly. So I would like to ask the same question here in the studio.
Right.
Chihi, how far have you made it up this pyramid?
Well, first of all, I was quite surprised to see this pyramid at first because I couldn't really relate to it.
Really? Now why?
Because not everybody spends money to show off their wealth. And especially the last two on the pyramid, which I have done before. I don't think there are ways of flexing or showing off your wealth, really.
The last two, what, have
the
your
body
own home,
profile
luxury
shoot.
cars?
No, I meant the bottom tier, the bottom tier. So having a body profile shoot and also fine dining. Because from time to time on special occasions, on family birthdays, or if you're with a loved one wanting to celebrate a special day, you would go on fine dining. And I've done those two before, so I'd say I'm on the 7th tier of this pyramid. Yes, but I don't think, like I said, not everybody wants to show off through these sort of consumptions.
Right. And the point of this pyramid is that you can't afford it, yet you still want to show off.
Yeah.
So knowing all this, where do you land on the pyramid?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, I've never been such a big fan of luxury goods in general. You know, it's not to say that I'm against all things expensive, but I prefer something that fits the price range. Something with, you know, if it's going to be expensive, I expect fantastic craftsmanship. I expect good quality, something that'll last long, made from good ingredients, or, you know, even if it's clothing, made from good, the base cloth
materials,
as well. Materials, yeah. But a lot of the times it seems like today's trend of luxury goods market especially, they'd like to focus more on the marketing side of things. It's all about the hype, it's all about creating something cool. I mean, I actually personally quite like watches, and I wish to be on the top tier of the pyramid for watches one day. But even the watches, some of the more sort of fashion brands, that are luxury brands, they don't have good movements.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, the watch might look nice, but the movement inside might be bought from a Japanese Miyota movement usually. That's what the mid-range watches go for.
So to sum up,
stop there.
right, to sum up, you aren't really for Jose.
I hate Jose.
Yeah, you're not really.
To be honest, I think that's what some people were actually a little bit against, because it says Hosepyramid,
Right.
and it kind of makes you think, oh, am I going to show off if I select this?
Am I
if
bluffing?
I say,
Right.
For sure. Now, Chihi, I also know that you found some own comments yourself from our viewers and also people who wrote down comments on different articles. Why don't you share it with us?
That's right. So here's what some other youth from our generation had to say. Take a look at the screen. One is a 26-year-old graduate who felt flustered studying and trying to save up without an income. That's why he said we all should have a reality check. Make sure that we're standing at the right place, or we can afford the things that we want to buy regarding this pyramid. And another millennial said this pyramid made her want to save up harder, which was a good motivation for her. And one person in his mid-40s said you should spend on things you actually want and need. And your consumption shouldn't be affected by others.
And these are all very good points, but I think it comes down, I think our discussion topic comes down to Jose, this keyword, right? It's not about how you spend your money, it's about whether you can afford it or not, yet choose to show off. So what do you think about this, Xiang? Do you think spending money, sometimes to the extent that it's burdensome, seems to be a new virtue for millennials and Gen Z?
Yeah, I mean, especially I'm glad that the 26-year-old's comment we saw just now said that we should all have a reality check regarding the pyramid. I shared his opinion when our newsroom first discussed this topic of Hase as well, because the fact is the majority of Koreans who live outside of Seoul don't even have easy access to such overly luxurious items.
Good point.
The illusion of inclusivity social media and online media spaces create is also a fabricated one, and that's a fertile, extremely fertile ground for big luxury goods companies to have some marketing schemes going around where you can manipulate the public crowd into thinking these are sort of everyday essential items. If you go out on the streets on the way to work, you got to look a certain way. All these fabricated images, which are great, which is part of our society, our culture. But still that promotes a lot of overspending. A lot of times you think, oh, I'll need this bag because everybody's got one.
Right.
Because it's the it item, it's the trendy item of the day.
And it's quite ironic because at the same time we're saying stuff like 거지방, like open community chat rooms, like promote not spending too much, right?
Yeah.
So it's very different there. But what are your
Moderate.
thoughts, Chi, on our generation spending excessively?
Well, I agree with the comment made by the person who was in his 40s. He said we should spend money only on things that we want and we need and not buy things because of others, by comparing yourself with others. But I think sadly, our society is a 눈치 society, meaning we tend to be very conscious of what others think of ourselves, which is why we compare ourselves in terms of what we have, the materialistic aspects, which is also why Korea stands among the top countries who spend the most on luxurious goods, right? So I think this is all related to this 허세피라미드, wanting to show off materialistically.
All right, and now I think it's a good time to include an economics expert and hear what he has to say on our discussion topic. We'll be back right after this. All right, let's hear from an economics expert and find out what he has to say on young people spending excessively. More specifically, let's find out what he has to say about the psychology of having to or wanting to spend a lot. Please welcome Dr. Jared Watson, Assistant Professor of Marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. Pleasure to have you here again, Dr. Watson.
Hello, Dr. Watson.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all.
All right, Dr. Watson, you probably saw this showing off pyramid throughout our whole discussion today. What do you think about it? And do you think millennials and Gen Z actually do have a tendency to show off with their spending?
Yeah, I think the show-off pyramid does a great job at historically capturing how people have tried to flex, how they've tried to show off, or as you said, the Jose. I think it's evolved a little bit since then, right? So when we think about Gen Z and millennials today, the one aspect I think that might have been missing was the experiential aspect.
Right.
So we see a lot of emphasis today with showing off through novelty, going places other people haven't been, being the first to a place. And, you know, odds are if we were to ask people today, if they want to go to the latest Michelin-starred restaurant or the newest hot restaurant in town, a decent chunk of them would opt for that newest, hot, hard-to-get-into place because of that scarcity aspect. So I think the pyramid captures quite a bit with some tweaks for the younger generations.
For sure.
Yes, I mean, Dr. Watson as well, why do you think a growing number of youths or youngsters think spending a lot is the way to go? I mean, is this case in the States too? A lot of goods are expensive these days. The luxury companies are hiking up the prices every year. I mean, what do you think is behind this trend as well?
Sure. I think two things are driving it. So the first of which is social media. We can see what people are doing today, right? It's easier for us to show off, create the impression of wealth than ever before. The other one is when we look at the top of that pyramid, it's becoming harder and harder to attain. Right. So as that Gen Z or that millennial individual looking at that pyramid, it's a lot easier to say, maybe I should treat myself to a $200 dinner because I'm a long way off from buying the house. Right. We see reaching the top of that pyramid futile. And so we indulge in the bottom of the pyramid more frequently.
Before we go on to the last question, though, I have a quick question. If they try to save up $200 for that really good dinner, that means they have to save up on other things, sometimes to the point that, you know, they can't buy necessities in life. What's with that?
Yeah, so a big part of that is people focusing on the wrong aspect, right? So last time I was here, we talked about value. And I think what happens is people get allured by the benefits that come with that purchase, and they don't focus on the costs. And it's not just the financial costs, right? But it's also the psychosocial or the emotional costs. And so we look and we say, great, people are going to love it. People are going to see us. We're going to be there. And we're not focusing on, oh, but tomorrow, that means I have to go without, right? Or next week, I'm going to have to scrounge or ask my parents for additional money. And as a function of that, right, it's just overweighting the benefits and not paying enough attention to the costs.
Sure.
I see. And Chi, you have a question for Dr. Watson as well?
Right. So, Dr. Watson, what's the best way we can spend money? Do you have any tips for us?
Sure. So, that last comment you had from the 40-something-year-old individual, I think captured it, which is you've got to focus on yourself and not on others. And, an easy way to do that is just to go through the thought experiment and say, how am I going to feel about this purchase 1 month from now? What about 1 year from now, right? What if nobody sees it? How am I going to feel? And if you go through that thought experiment of those possible outcomes, that will hopefully help people consider the costs associated with that purchase. And as a result, they're going to make sure that they'll be truly satisfied after they do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. It was a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you, Dr.
Always.
Watson.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. And as usual, Dr. Watson gave us a lot of good points we could talk about. Any that you had in mind?
No, I totally agreed with Dr. Watson how he said we should focus on ourselves when we're spending money. Really make sure that you want it and you're not just buying it to please others.
Right, for sure. What about you, Xiang?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agreed with the point where you made rare experiences, rare items. I think that's really becoming a thing as well. First to be somewhere, first to a newly opened restaurant, first to have this limited edition line of shoes, watches, whatever you think. I think that really drives up the hype of spending as well.
For sure. And before we end up our discussion, why don't we talk about like the disparity in consumption? I think some people would not even care to spend a few dollars on lunch, but they would, save up to buy like this really expensive car.
Some people will buy a coffee when they have the 10 stamps on a coupon, but they'll be like, oh, I'm going to get that Louis Vuitton bag or something.
But what do you think is with that? Why do you think our generation does that?
I mean, I think, to be honest, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, Dr. Wilson mentioned as well, I think this is social media as well. It drives a lot of that. A lot of marketing, a lot of people, other people wearing this, doing that. You see, you go on in, your social media, and there's everybody going to nice restaurants, driving their nice cars. So I think the concern here, that's not for everybody. I see a lot of that, but I try to distance that from the level of affordability I can actually afford myself. I think the key point here is to spend wisely, as in the sense, if you want something nice, if you want something from a bigger brand, luxury items, you buy that so it lasts a long time. So go for the brands that actually has good quality, has reputation to last the years to come.
All right, and see, any tips on how we should spend more wisely then?
Well, don't go broke trying to look rich.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, no matter how much you want to show off materialistically, there are virtues and the vibes that a person can get only by investing your time and effort in it, not just money. So I want us to be able to appreciate, recognize, and really cherish those virtues, invaluable virtues that money can't buy.
All right, and I think that's a very good way we can end up.
Spiritual way.
Exactly. All right. Now, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiang.
My pleasure, Ian.
And Choi Ji-hee.
Thank you, Ian.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.